focused on cutting chips. Rural,
Yeah.
maternal,
What made him start? I'm not sure. He's just doing it to disrupt. I don't think anything particular set him off. He went up there with a bunch of letters. He's got a whole binder up there, you can see. He's been reading apparently like letters from constituents as well as articles and whatnot. I figured we could just hang out with him, support him, hang out with each other too.
And even potentially positive outcomes into adulthood, such as improvements in education.
Yes, that is what a filibuster is.
Medicaid leads to.
Yeah.
How about Native Americans and Alaskan Indians? 4 in 10 American Indian, Alaskan Native people are enrolled in Medicaid.
That's a good question.
Enrollment rate among any race.
Let me see when he started.
Ethnicity category. This includes about 23% of non-elderly AIAN adults and 44% of American Indian, Alaska Native children. How the federal government funds states' Medicaid plans. Medicaid began as an optional program in 1966 alongside Medicare, with around 8 million people eligible for enrollment. In the 1980s, all states had opted into providing health insurance through Medicaid.
Let's see.
Though eligibility requirements have changed over the last 60 years and vary by state, the most significant change to Medicaid was the enactment of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act in 2010. It requires states to cover adults with incomes up to 138% of the poverty line. After the Supreme Court ruled in 2012 that expansion for states should be optional, 40 states and Washington, D.C. have expanded Medicaid. 40 of our 50 states accepted federal funds at a much higher rate than the match rate for non-expansion. That is a good summary by PBS of how far-reaching this program
what time
is.
Did he start?
How many Americans in
I'm not saying where he started.
From all backgrounds,
I'm saying one report
independents, old, young,
3 hours ago.
Businesses,
I think it might have started around 3 hours ago.
This is who we are.
Let's look up what the rules are.
We've expanded the program.
His record for filibuster, his personal record, from 2016 was a 14-hour and 50-minute filibuster. He wants to break his last record, his previous record. 7. He started at 7.
We're not bringing in private sector professionals to give advice and input, or
I don't think anyone can tap him out. The official record from anyone is from 1957, where someone went 24 hours. Senator Storm Thurmond went 24 hours and 18 minutes.
Access to fresh, healthy food that then cause us to need more
Let's see.
healthcare for chronic diseases.
Senate filibuster.
This alone
rules.
would be bad enough. We were gutting a program with no input from professionals.
I mean, technically, it's not like he's not filibustering a specific bill, but if he breaks his record, he will be doing this into the morning of tomorrow's session, which is going to create problems it is going to delay things for Republicans.
Disproportionately to the wealthiest Americans, and still add trillions to the national deficit. I talked about American Indian and Alaskan Natives. I mentioned that. I've recently visited some proud Native Americans and heard their stories and was inspired by their conviction and their grit, and how under incredible odds they were able to create better lives after extraordinary oppression and vicious policies and more. They found a way forward. There's a disproportionate number of Native Americans and Alaskan Natives that rely on these programs. People who have maintained extraordinary dignity
without food, drink, or physical support.
Promises made and promises broken. So many people are talking about that idea of a sacred trust that the richest nation in the world, to honor its ideals of freedom, has to focus on keeping people free from fear that one medical bill will throw their family in crisis, or fear that one diagnosis for their child will unravel their lives, or fear that if their parent gets dementia, there'll be no care for them. So much of this conversation is within this larger understanding of who we are and what do we stand for. I want to take a look at some of the things the Trump administration is doing that is going to undermine not just Medicaid, but health insurance coverage for Americans, for all Americans, and raise the cost of health care and negatively impact our health at a time when basic prices of everyday goods are going up. The president is making health care harder to access and drug prices even higher. I want to explain this. On his first day back in office, Trump rescinded a policy that extended the enrollment period for ACA plans. This policy gave Americans sufficient time to enroll in health care for the year, and enrollment in the ACA continues to go up as people see how affordable this program is and how they can get quality health care. But one of the first things he does is rescind a policy that extended the enrollment period. In addition to this, Republicans in Congress want to take away the tax credits that make health care more affordable for so many people. Millions of working class Americans rely on Affordable Care Act tax credits to access affordable quality health care and coverage. I could go on with the things. For example, currently these tax credits, they're set to expire at the end of this year. If these tax credits are taken away, families will pay up to 90% more for their health care, and 5 million Americans could lose their health care altogether. All again, if this goes through in 2025, billionaires and CEOs will get a huge tax break while working Americans relying on this tax credit will lose it.
Yes.
Think about that. This would allow billionaires and CEOs to get more of a tax break while these tax credits that help more Americans access health care would expire. For New Jerseyans, ending the ACA tax credit would make health insurance less affordable for 352,000 hardworking people and their families, and would force 75,000 people to go uninsured, 75,000 people in my state alone. Last year, 24 million people chose Affordable Care Act plans during the most recent open enrollment period due to these expanded tax credits that made plans available for people for little or no monthly premiums, and extended the enrollment period, which I just said the president has rolled back. President Trump also overturned an effort for Medicare to lower drug costs, like implementing a $2 monthly out-of-pocket cap on certain generic drugs, as well as a measure that would reduce Medicare payments for rare disease drugs and drugs that treat life-threatening conditions. I just don't understand that one. I really see that as cruel. Americans struggling to afford their drugs had a cap of out-of-pocket expenses on certain generic drugs, and that was overturned. Costs are going up. Costs are going up. And now this president is expanding costs for out-of-pocket generic drugs, as well as Medicaid payments being eligible for rare diseases. I had the privilege of becoming close to John McCain. I came here in the Senate and got this admonition almost from Bill Bradley, somebody who held my seat beforehand, and he challenged me to go and have lunch with or meetings with all my Republican colleagues at the time. That was way back in 2013. And I was told by John McCain's staff that I had like 10, 15 minutes. But I was going to take it. This is John McCain. He's a legend. And I go in and I meet with him. And I didn't come out of that office for about 90 minutes. And we both got emotional as he showed me pictures and documentation from his time as a prisoner of war. In 2017, he was under extraordinary pressure in this healthcare crisis. And there were thousands of Americans descending on our Capitol. I'll never forget the little lobbyists, they called themselves, kids in wheelchairs, that would roll up to Congress people and raise their little voice respectfully and ask them not to take away their health coverage. I remember people coming in here with pre-existing conditions and say, don't repeal my health care, and not even have a plan to replace it. President Trump was asked about health care when he was candidate Trump for this office, and he said he had, I think it was conceptions of a plan. And since he's been in office, I haven't heard a vision for health care besides budget proposals that would cut people's health care.
Hi, baby. You want to come up?
But John McCain, I will never, ever forget that moment. I was actually standing on the Republican side,
Rizzo wants to
if I
come
remember
say
correctly, having conversations, and came to the floor after listening to Arizonans tell stories like the ones I've been reading, and put his thumb down. He wrote a speech about his decision, and I want to read a part of that now. I have been a member of the United States Senate
You trim your little nails.
for 30 years. I had another long, if not as long, career before I arrived here. Another profession that was profoundly rewarding, and in which I had experiences and friendships that I revere. But make no mistake, my service here is the most important job I've had in my life. And I'm so grateful to the people of Arizona for the privilege, for the honor of serving here and the opportunities it gives me to play a small role in the history of the country.
Is he already getting tired?
I love.
I hope not.
I've known and admired men and women in the Senate who played much more than a small role in history. True statesmen, giants of American politics. They came from both parties and various backgrounds. Their ambitions were frequently in conflict. They had different views on the issues of the day. And they often had very serious disagreements about how to best serve the national interest. But they knew that however sharp and heartfelt their disputes, however keen their ambitions,
Want to get down?
they had an obligation to work collaboratively to ensure the Senate discharged its constitutional responsibilities effectively. Our responsibilities are important, vitally important, to the
Me
continued
too.
success of our republic. And our arcane rules
And he's weak. You
and
fucking do it,
customs
Lem.
are deliberately intended to require
You speak for
broad
3.5 hours.
cooperation
You speak
to
and stand
function
for 3.5
well
hours.
at all. The most revered members of this institution accepted the necessity of compromise in order to make incremental progress on solving America's problems and to defend her from her adversaries. That principled mindset and the service of our predecessors who possessed it come to mind when I hear the Senate referred to as the world's most deliberative body. I'm not sure we can claim that distinction with a straight face today.
I don't like him either, in
I'm
general,
sure it wasn't
but I
always
like that he's
deserved
doing
in the
this.
previous eras either. But I'm sure there have been times when it was, and I was privileged to witness some of those occasions. Our deliberations today, not just our debates, but the exercise of all of our responsibilities, authorizing government policies, appropriating the funds to implement them, exercising our advice and consent role are often lively and interesting. They can be sincere and principled, but they are more partisan, more tribal, more of the time than any other time
They
I
aren't
remember.
PA, but okay.
Our deliberations can still be important and useful, but I think we'd all agree they haven't been overburdened by greatness lately. And right now, they aren't producing much for the American people. Both sides have let it happen. Let's leave the history of who shot first to historians. I suspect they'll find we all conspired in our decline, either by deliberate actions or neglect. We've all played some role in it. Certainly I have. Sometimes I've let my passion rule my reason. Sometimes I made it harder to find common ground because of something harsh I said to a colleague. Sometimes I wanted to win more for the sake of winning than to achieve a contested policy. Incremental progress, compromises that each side criticize but also accept, just plain muddling through to chip away at problems and keep our enemies from doing their worst, isn't glamorous or exciting. It doesn't feel like a political triumph, but it's usually
like I said, I'm not a big fan of Cory's, but I'm capable of saying that I like that he's doing this.
Operating in a country as
Like,
diverse
really?
and quarrelsome
When someone does something good, you're just
and
going to sit
free
and list the laundry
ours.
list of things that you don't like about them?
Considering
Can we
the
maybe just
justice and
focus on,
cruelties
like, the
inflicted by
actions as they're taking
autocratic
them?
governments
Like a little bit?
and how
Every fucking once in a
contemptible human
while?
nature
Jesus
can
fucking
be,
Christ,
the
dude.
problem-solving our system does make possible,
3 hours,
the
3.5
fitful
hours.
progress
Since
it
7 p.m.
produces,
Eastern Standard
and
Time.
the liberty and justice it preserves is a magnificent achievement. Our system doesn't depend on our nobility. It accounts for our imperfections and gives an order to our individual strivings that has helped make ours the most powerful and prosperous society on earth. It is our responsibility to preserve that, even when it requires us to do something less satisfying than winning, even when we must give a little to get a little, even when our efforts manage just 3 yards in a cloud of dust, while critics on both sides denounce us for timidity, for our failure to triumph. I hope we can again rely on humility, on our need to cooperate, on our dependence on each other to learn how to treat each other again, and by so doing better serve the people, by learn how to trust each other again, and by so doing better serve the people who elected us. Stop listening to the bombastic loudmouths on the radio and television and the internet. To hell with them. They don't want anything done for the public good. Our incapacity is their livelihood. Let's trust each other again.
Thank you.
Let's return to regular order. We've been spinning our wheels on too many important issues because we keep trying to find a way to win without help from across the aisle.
How's it going?
That's an approach that's been employed by both sides. Mandating legislation from the top down without any support from the other side, with all the parliamentary maneuvers that requires. We're getting nothing done.
Idea, Sprite.
All we've really done this year is confirm Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court.
But I like what he's doing too. He's been reading the
insurance system is a
perspectives
mess.
of
We all know it.
constituents and
support
stuff. And
Obamacare and
he's
those
giving
who
people a
oppose it.
voice while Republicans ignore
Something
them.
has to be done. We Republicans have looked for a way to end it and replace it with
We'll
something
fucking see,
else
Sprite.
without paying a terrible political price.
I need more water, excuse me.
We haven't found it yet, and I'm not sure we will. All we've managed to do is make more popular a policy that wasn't very popular when we started to try to get rid of it. I voted for the motion to proceed to allow debate to continue and amendments to be offered. I will not vote for the bill as it is today. It's a shell of a bill right now. We all know that. I have changes urged by my state's governor that will have to be included to earn my support for final passage of any bill. I know many of you will have to see the bill change substantially for you to support it. We've tried to do this by coming up with a proposal behind closed doors in consultation with the administration, then signing it on skeptical, then springing it on skeptical
Oh,
members,
really?
trying to convince them it's better than nothing, asking us to swallow our doubts and force it past a unified opposition. I don't think that is going to work in the end.
I'm on the tube. Technically, I have a red note, but I don't really post on there. Please find me on the tube.
I mean, that is prescient. I mean, that is prescient. As a great New Jerseyan, Yogi Berra said,
Please don't judge me. I got
feels like deja vu
Domino's
all over.
tonight. I wanted chicken.
do you hear what John McCain was criticizing?
Should we try to stay up late with him
One party
tonight?
behind closed doors, without
Yeah, same name.
consultation of experts, against the wishes of Republican governors.
There's a link tree in my
is
profile.
trying to force something through past a united opposition.
Yeah.
He literally is describing what's happening right now and condemning
Hello.
both sides of this institution for playing this record
No, this is
over
my
and
lunch
over
or
and
dinner.
over again. Yes, I'm a Democrat, and I admit that our healthcare system needs so much help and so much reform. 1 out of every 3 of our tax dollars.
Cory
is
Booker's
spent
speaking
on
as long as he
healthcare.
can.
That's ridiculous. And what are we getting from it? A society that's getting more and more sick. And what of our solutions as a body? Did we come together as a team? Did we set up a special conference, set up a special committee to study the
Plenty,
issues, to bring in
70.
the experts, to involve the best technology, to learn the lessons from private sector and public sector, from universities, from scientists? Are we doing that, or are we doing exactly what John McCain said we shouldn't do? Exactly what he described, why he
I
voted
said
no.
plenty.
It is maddening in this country. Create greater and greater healthcare crisis, and for us not to solve it, but to battle back and forth between trying to make incremental changes or to tear it all down with no plan to make it better, leaving more Americans suffering what is still one of the most significant ways people go bankrupt, which is not being able to afford
Thank
their
you,
health
Sprite.
care. And what are we
Appreciate you.
doing it for this time, John? Senator McCain? I know you wouldn't sanction this. I
Why
know
don't you
would
listen?
scream. I've
70?
seen
Someone's
how angry
answering
you
your
get,
fucking
John
questions.
McCain. I've seen you tear
But you're not
people
here
apart
for
on
an
this
answer,
board,
are you?
Democrat and
You're just here to
Republican,
try to,
for doing
like,
the same stupid
I don't know,
thing over and over
get me
again.
debating you or something? If
Listen to
you're happy
John
with
McCain.
what Musk is doing, that's fine. Good for
Explain
you.
why he voted no
You can
the
be
last
happy with what he's
time
doing.
the
No one
Republican
cares.
Party tried to unite
I'm
and
not.
tear down healthcare with no idea how to fix
When
it.
you decide that you're unhappy with it because it finally affects you negatively, I'll welcome you at the protests. Until then, you're a waste of my fucking time. You're a waste of everyone's fucking time.
With thousands upon thousands of Americans writing letters, storming into town halls, hospital leaders, private sector leaders, Republican governors, Republican mayors, Democratic governors, Democratic mayors, all saying, what are you doing in Congress? And why? I think what's even more outrageous this time is the why. To redo the tax cuts that independent budget analyses know that the overwhelming benefit went to the billionaires that sat on stage
It's a good question,
with Donald
Sprite.
Trump during his inauguration.
I actually don't know.
We're not saving any money in our
And
budgets.
I don't know how we find that
Their
out,
plan
to be
is
honest.
to expand our budget crisis. Their plan will add trillions of dollars to our budget
Well, that's my answer, 70.
and give tax cuts to the wealthiest and not help the people that John McCain is talking about. His echoes haunt me that he said, we are mistaken when we don't come together across the aisles, across our differences, to try to make things better. There is a health crisis
No, it's
in
being
this
streamed
country.
live on some
One
news.
out of $3 in our
Whatchamacallits
government is going
accounts.
to health
I
care, and we have more
realized-
chronic disease in this
I saw the
nation than
headline,
we've
but I
ever
didn't
had
I
before,
like
and there's no
forgot about
solution
it
being offered in this reconciliation
until
to deal
like
with that.
2 minutes before I
In
went
fact,
live because I
we're
was
making it worse
scrolling and I
because
saw
we're
it pop
denying
up on my
children access to healthy food.
on my TikTok. It was on Reuters live, I believe.
This
Hi,
is
Clem.
ridiculous. If they're successful, what kind of country will we be? With more stratifications of wealth, with people who have done so good. I'm not one of these Democrats that hate successful or
I'm
wealthy
gonna turn my
people.
news on in the background just to see if
Heck,
anyone else
people
is.
in my neighborhood, the only senator that probably lives in a low-income neighborhood, strive to be wealthy. They are doing great. The top quartile of our country for the last 20 years has made extraordinary wealth. God bless them. But when you see that 70, 80% of Americans don't want Medicaid cuts, it's because most Americans know neighbors, family members, church members who rely on Medicaid. They know that their grandmother in a nursing home relies on Medicaid. They know that the disabled child next door relies on Medicaid. And now we want to gut it? $880 billion?
Dumpers came to Saturday's protest, walking up and down both sides of the street.
Most people
Today's
remember the
protest
thumb
got
down.
three
They don't
more than
remember
any
his
other
words.
Monday.
They don't remember
Driving up
the
and
warnings. This man is in heaven
back
now,
blathering out
and
their
his
passenger
words, they
side
speak
window.
to us in this moment again.
That's how you
Why
know
don't
it's
we
working,
listen
when
to
the
them?
dumpers are fucking whining about it.
Our deliberations today, not just our debates, but the exercise of our responsibilities, authorizing government policies, appropriating the funds to implement them, they can be sincere in principle, but they are more partisan, more tribal, more of the time than any I remember. Our deliberations can still be important and useful, but I think we'd all agree that they have they've been overburdened. And right now, they aren't producing much for the American people. Both sides have let this happen. Let's leave the history of who shot first to the historians. I suspect they will find we all conspired in our decline, either by deliberate actions or by neglect. Listen to John McCain. Our system doesn't depend on our nobility. It accounts for our imperfections and gives an order to our individual strivings that has helped make ours the most powerful and prosperous society on earth. Listen to us. Let's trust each other. Let's return to regular order. We've been spinning our wheels on too many important issues because we keep trying to find a way to win without the help from the other side. That's an approach that's been employed by both sides. Mandating legislation from the top down without support from the other side. We're getting nothing done. All we've done this year is to confirm Neil Gorsuch. I voted for the motion to proceed to allow debate to continue and amendments to office. I will not vote for the bill as it stands today. I will not vote for the bill. We've tried doing this by coming up with a proposal behind closed doors in consultation with the administration, Donald Trump, then signing it on.
Hi, Andrew. Cory Booker is basically filibustering in a sense. He's not filibustering a specific bill, but he's speaking in Congress until he drops, basically.
I don't think that is going to work in the end.
He's been going for 3 hours and 40 minutes so far.
This shouldn't work either. This is wrong.
I figured we could hang out.
is wrong. I see the leader here. I'm sorry, sir. I should be conserving my energy.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Yes, I would yield for a question while retaining the floor.
First, your impassioned remarks are so meaningful. I hope all of America is watching. And if some people are not up at this hour,
Andrew.
watch it tomorrow. It's inspiring. And I would just ask my colleague a question. I was there. I spent 4 hours with John McCain before he voted. And we talked and talked and talked and went over the courage of his father and his grandfather in the Navy and the courage that he hoped to show as they did. And I'd ask my colleague this question. Isn't it eerily reminiscent that after John McCain did his courageous act, that here we are, years
You think
later,
Chuck
almost a
would dare?
decade later, a few years less, and they're doing the same thing again, cutting people's health care to give tax breaks to the wealthiest people. And isn't it true that John McCain saw the suffering of people who wouldn't get health care and urged people to come together on a bipartisan solution? And wouldn't it be much better if our colleagues from across the aisle, they may not agree with us on everything, but instead of trying
Do
to
you wanna hop
jam
up, Andrew?
another bill down our throats like they
Figure
did
we'd
back in
just hang out tonight.
2017, came and worked with us for the betterment of the country, for the betterment of the 80% of the people who need health care, who will struggle without that health care. Some will be ill, some will die. Will die. So does it strike the gentleman that how could the people on the other side of the aisle try to do this again after John McCain made such a courageous stance? It's not echoing. It doesn't seem to be echoing in their ears, is it? I'd ask my colleague to just answer that general line of question.
So Collins, Murkowski, and McCain,
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I think it took a lot of courage. They were getting a lot of pressure from the White House.
All right. It's up to you, Andrew.
John McCain was viciously attacked afterwards. But his private conversations with members, and you, Senator Schumer, know at the last lap around his track of life, he didn't want to be remembered as someone doing something, to use John McCain kind of language, boneheaded, to hurt a lot of innocent, fragile people and leave them without a plan. When his own governor, Republican governor, I read Republican governors earlier, were saying, don't do this. I want to say something else to the senator in response to his question. I watched you that night. And I just loved something you did, and I've never said this to you. People over here trying to start applauding. And you stood up angrily and told them not to. Because what John showed was something bigger than partisanship. And he talks about it, one side trying to win, the other side trying to, it's more ego sometimes than it is ideals. And you stood up and said, no, this is not that moment. We're watching a man take a position that was not easy, that didn't serve his politics, but served his spirit. I don't know if my staff has that envelope of the articles that I wanted specifically, because there's a story in there, and if I don't have it now, I'm going to read it later, about John McCain in the prison camps. But I wasn't here when we had this moment, but when I got here weeks after this moment, Mr. Leader, all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle wanted to talk about it. It was a special conference in the old Senate chamber. I was not there, but the Democrats and Republicans, it actually changed our behavior in here. It didn't last, but I came here and people said, because of that, we're all going to partner up. And for State of the Union addresses, you have a Republican partner and a Democrat. We go as couples, basically. It was something about this man where the dignity that he had, that we all treasured, in a moment like that, that he began to elevate. I had my partner senator here say to me when I got here, you are not a full senator until you get ripped by John McCain's anger. And
I'm well aware.
Okay, and I never got ripped by him. After my meeting I mentioned earlier in his office, he started inviting me with him. My first Codell was with him and telling me, he told me all the time, Booker, there are two types of senators here. I don't mean that he was casting aspersions on others. There are people that represent their states, and there are statesmen. And he kept challenging me, be a statesman. Not a great Democratic senator, but be a great American senator. He would challenge me over and over and over again. I would go
No one cares
to his,
about your opinion, Nanny.
his national security conferences out at his ranch. And one of my favorite moments as a senator, if I had top 10 favorite moments as a U.S. senator, this is one of them. The leader knows that I am a vegan. And when you go to one of his open barbecues, there is nothing vegan. I mean, they even saturated every vegetable in butter, and mayonnaise was everywhere. But I'm not going to complain. I'm just going to sit and enjoy the conversations. And so now I'm in a golf cart going home at the end of the night, and the young man who was shuttling me home goes to me, how was the food? Did you enjoy the dinner? And I go, well, actually, if I'm going to be honest, I didn't eat. And they go, you haven't had dinner? And I go, no. I said, I'm a vegan. And they go, well, we're about to pass John McCain's home where he lives, and I'm sure it's late. I'm sure he's asleep. But maybe we can break in and see what's in his fridge. And I'm like, dude, I'm from Jersey. I love this. Breaking into John McCain's house, and I won't have to worry about getting arrested. I said, I'm all in. And so we went in, and as soon as we rounded the kitchen, I looked through the kitchen, and John McCain was sitting there with another elderly, tough-looking man
This is a good
on
story.
the couch, engaged in conversation. So I didn't get my joy of breaking into John McCain's house, but I walk in, and he is sitting there with the former secretary, if I remember correctly, of the Navy. And they're like, Booker, sit down. I haven't eaten. He goes, So I'm sitting there eating peanut butter and like celery or whatever. And these two men are talking about government inefficiency. And they say the place that we could be saving the most money, former secretary, if I remember correctly, of the Navy, and one of the great men on national security, they started detailing the waste in the military. They both claimed that we could have much more capacity, greater military effectiveness for billions and billions and billions of dollars less. I'll never forget. Again, this is me new to the Senate. I don't know foreign policy like I do 12 years later.
I'm not sure if that works,
like I do 12 years later.
I do
but
appreciate
I was listening to these two experienced men complaining about the gross waste that was undermining our overall effectiveness and efficiency. And that's why, to this day, I'm infuriated that when people come in and say they want to cut budgets, the first thing they want to go for is not to take a real, because the military hasn't passed an audit in years, to have a real conversation about a lot of the baked-in corruption and misspending in the military, but they're going after programs that hospital after hospital, healthcare provider after healthcare provider, leader after leader, governor after governor says, are you crazy? And so this is one of the more preposterous moments that you and I both know if John McCain was here right now, he would reject this whole thing.
He's doing.
We were literally repeating.
It's just a form of protest.
Thing we did in 2017.
If he manages to last
8 years
overnight and into the morning, he'll start really disrupting things.
Question while retaining the floor.
Isn't it true? When McCain talked about waste in the military, he studied it, he documented it. He said, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing. He helped guide me on
watching this go down, I guess.
I voted for some weapon system, getting some people upset because he showed me they worked, and I voted against a lot of them because he showed me they didn't. But isn't it so that our colleagues on the other side, when they talk about waste in the healthcare system, they don't document a thing? They use just a meat axe as...
Not right now, but in the morning there will be.
Elon Musk perversely but proudly said he's going to carry one. And they don't document waste that they say exists, and then they just slash things that people need. That's not waste at all. That's life support for people. Isn't that a huge difference between the way McCain looked at waste, whether it's in the military or anything else, and what we're hearing here today?
Resoundingly, yes. I'm just laughing that every time Doge puts up their supposed savings, they then try to take them down because as soon as they're fact-checked, so many of them are not done. And I'm not saying all of them. I don't want to paint with a broad brush. I know having Microsoft licenses too many, yeah, there's waste. I wish we were doing this in a bipartisan way. Those cuts would be bigger and probably have a lot more staying power than what they're doing, which is ready, fire, aim, and then having to beg people to come back to work because they fired FAA people or nuclear regulators or what have you. But this is the bigger point that you're making that really is getting me. So you know this, I used to be an executive. There's nobody in this body. Here's a bold and braggadocious thing to say, but fact-check me, anybody. There's nobody in this body that was a governor, a county executive like Coons, or a mayor that cut government as much as I did. I had to cut my government by 25%. Imagine that here on the federal level. And I had to do it because I can't print money. It was a national recession. I was left with a mess, had to do it. But we found ways to do it cooperatively with the legislator, bringing in experts. But this is the point I want to make to you. One thing I couldn't cut was my health care costs. And so I started asking people, what can I do? And you know who I found? I found a big business owner who had tens of thousands of employees who said I had the same problem. And you know what I did? I went into my cafeteria where thousands of people eat, big place, and I saw deep fryers and like Cinnabon-like products and all this unhealthy stuff. And I ripped it all out, had the union ready to go crazy on me, but then I brought in the best shelves. I paid extra money to get the best kind of all healthy, nutritious, whole foods, and then they loved it. And then they started asking me, can we get food to take home for our kids? Because we stopped through McDonald's or Burger King on the way home. Long story short, he said, it began to bend their cost curve. What do we do in the United States of America? What is Donald Trump, I just read, all thing doing? He's cutting access to healthy lunch programs. They're threatening to cut SNAP programs. They're threatening to cut the things that would give our residents in America, not the cheap, hyper-processed, empty nutrition foods, but the stuff that is healthy for our kids. So there's so much hypocrisy based in this that even the private sector folks are saying, you are going to drive up costs for your country when you make people get their health care in emergency rooms. You're going to drive up costs for your country when you're going to force people to have to quit their jobs so they can come home and take care of their loved one with dementia. This will drive up costs ultimately for our country, put more hardship on people, all while giving the most wealthy people who don't need it bigger tax cuts. It makes no sense, and that is the spirit of why John McCain voted against this effort in 2017.
Thank the gentleman. It's a hope, maybe forlorn, that maybe one of John McCain's words will influence a few folks over there before we proceed disastrously. I wish the gentleman strength and yield the floor to him.
I appreciate you allowing me to yield to you to answer a question while retaining the floor. I'm going to continue with a little bit more here before we change topics for the night. I want to point out how grateful I am for my friend Chris Murphy. The last time I stood on this floor for many hours was just in support, doing like my colleague is doing for me right now. After the Pulse shooting, we wanted a vote on common sense gun safety, bipartisan supported common sense gun safety. We didn't get it. Chris Murphy right down there held the floor for 15 hours. And I paced around, walked the floor, helped to support things, stayed up with him all night. And it is profound to me that when I told my brother that I wanted to cause some good trouble, that I was going to rise, that he said, I'm in. And so there he is helping me out, especially as we approach 11 o'clock at night. And the fourth hour, I'm just grateful for him. I'm grateful for him. I want to go now to cuts that are being made to local and state health department funding. And again, Republican and Democratic governors, we have letters from people on both sides of the aisle who are saying that this is just wrong. And it makes no sense, but here we go.
Yeah.
It's actually a really, what I would call a dangerous reversal that Trump's HH&S recently announced the cancellation of almost $12 billion in federal grants that state and local health departments have been using to track infectious diseases, health disparities, vaccinations, mental health, substance use, and services. Because of that reversal,
Riz, chill.
my state, for example, is going to lose $350 million in federal funding for health programs due to these cuts. My governor, Phil Murphy, said that these cuts would create an unfillable void in funding
Hey, Riz.
that will have disastrous ramifications for our most vulnerable neighbors.
Look, here.
Last week, we learned that HH&S planned to cut an additional 10,000 jobs.
Look there.
In total, since January,
Riz,
HH&S
look
has
here.
cut 20,000 of its employees. That's over a quarter of its workforce. These are people who inspect nursing homes to ensure that they're safe. They
Rizzo,
approve
that's
diagnostic
you.
and treatment services for
That's
children,
you.
regulate health insurance to make sure that they are not discriminating against you based on your health conditions and health status, to protect you from infectious diseases, conduct inspections to make sure that infant formula is safe. And
That's you, silly.
I want to tell you that Secretary Kennedy has committed to bringing radical transparency to the HH&S. I would love radical transparency. But at the end of February, Secretary Kennedy
wonder if
announced
he's
that
wearing a
HH&S
diaper.
is no longer required to undergo the public comment period, a practice that's taken place
Pop
at the
MSR.
agency
Yeah.
since
No,
1971.
SMR. Pop SMR. Right.
Another critical resource of health information for the American
She's
public
looking
is
at
the
herself.
CDC's
She's like,
Morbidity
that
and
dog?
Mortality
Who's
Weekly
that dog?
Report.
It's you, Riz.
That has been published since
you.
1952 and is often called the voice of the CDC. But unfortunately, on January 23rd,
He wants to break his own
the first time
record. Yeah.
since its inception, the report
And his
was not
record is,
published in a direct response to
I think,
the Trump administration's
either
freeze
14 hours and
on
50
public
minutes or
communications.
13 hours and 15
In addition
minutes.
to pausing
believe.
the critical publication, it also reported that the Pregnancy Risk Assessment Monitoring
makes-
System had halted operation. This PRAMS, which was developed in 1987, is designed to identify groups of women and infants at high risk for health problems, to monitor changes in health status, and to measure progress towards goals in improving the health of mothers and infants. Over the last 38 years, the program has collected essential data on maternal behaviors and experiences before, during, and shortly after pregnancy. Maternal care providers rely on that data collected by PRAMS, the sole source of this type of information, to enhance prenatal and postnatal care. The U.S. is in the midst of a mortality crisis, which we mentioned before. We have the highest rate of maternal deaths of any high-income nation. As I learned when I was a mayor, data is power. You can't manage a problem unless you have measures on the problem. To pull back things like that, again, you're reducing transparency, you're cutting back on vital reports that people who are trying to meet this crisis rely on to inform their strategies. And again, here's the frustration, is that as we are the worst in maternal health outcomes for developed nations, but even in our country, African American women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than the majority. This is one of the countries where it's profoundly dangerous to have kids. And again,
get down?
this is yet another thing that HHS is doing that's leaving us more vulnerable, less informed, less empowered to deal with the health challenges that we still deal with. Since the Trump administration made the disastrous decision
Am I
for
on
agencies
Booker?
to
Wait, I'm on
pause
Booker's TT
external communications,
TikTok.
we've been seeing significant delays
What?
in critical information from other key agencies. There have been avoidable delays in critical data from the CDC that states are starting to speak out, saying that they need to protect the health of their communities. As of March 20th, when it comes to vaccines, what we're seeing in America, talk about getting less safe. There are 378 confirmed cases of measles throughout the United States. As one of my doctor friends said, there are more children with measles right now than there are trans athletes in the NCAA. This is a real crisis. For the first time in a decade, a child who was not vaccinated for measles tragically died in that outbreak. And while measles is spreading across our nation, and we're having one of the worst flu seasons in the last decades, HHS has delayed the convening of critical advisory councils at the CDC and FDA. These advisory councils are responsible for determining the vaccine schedule, what vaccines must be covered by insurance, and the safety, effectiveness, and appropriate use of vaccines. They do essential and timely work to keep people safe, and disruptions to their work can be harmful to the health of the American people. Let me go to the National Institute of Health. It's the largest public funder of biomedical research in the world. It's facing devastating cuts. The NIH is one of the greatest successes in publicly funded scientific research in all of human history. The US is one of the best places to do scientific research because it has had more capacity than any other country to fund and conduct research at the highest levels. Pauses, lapses, and elimination of NIH funding will drive researchers to do their research in other countries and undermine the efforts to cure diseases, to find solutions to conditions, from obesity to Alzheimer's to cancers. One of the best taxpayer dollars we can invest is in NIH because it returns more than 5 taxpayers' dollars back in the breakthroughs that they make. We have put the future of scientific research in the United States at grave threats with what the Trump administration is now doing. They've imposed cuts and a number of harmful orders on the NIH that have both stalled its research and confused its partners. 99.4% of the FDA-approved drugs come from the NIH-funded research. Let me just say that again. NIH-funded research has led to
good questions, Brett. I don't know. I was wondering if you wore a diaper.
Of all the FDA drugs that are out there. The NIH funding cuts will directly affect your access to future novel treatments that can improve your quality of life or your children. Or if you love your neighbor like
You think so?
so many religions call us to do, with your neighbor's children as well. Here's an example of that.
Oh, you're not going anywhere?
Hepatitis C is a liver disease caused by the virus HCV, and it is one of the most common types of viral hepatitis in the United States. It is estimated that 3 to 4 million Americans have hepatitis. In 2014, the first complete treatment for hepatitis C was approved by the FDA. The development of this revolutionary new treatment that has since been used to cure millions of people around the world was funded by,
Has 10 million
NIH
likes?
research.
No.
This is a type of life-saving innovation we will lose out on if we defund
his.
the NIH as the Trump administration
That's awesome.
is currently doing. American enterprise and knowledge will be drained. We will fall behind. We already know there's fierce competition for the researchers by countries like China. They are aiming, in fact, they are upping their investments in scientific research, doing everything they can to keep scientific researchers in their country. I was just talking to an innovator out in the West Coast who was telling me that they're starting to take passports away from their researchers. There's a fierce competition going on to keep the best minds here in this country or be drawn away to other places from Europe to China. And we're stopping our funding? I've heard from academic institutions that are telling me that they're not even offering as many PhD programs in some of these key areas of science because of the attacks that are happening on our universities, all while China is upping their investments in the universities. I can't believe that they're trying to out-America us, and we're trying to turn our back on our most successful traditions. One of his first actions, President Trump imposed a communications freeze on all U.S. health agencies, effectively silencing some of our nation's top researchers, scientists, and public health experts. This action stalled 16,000 grant applications for around $1.5 billion in NIH funding. The NIH has since begun to incrementally send notices to the Office of the Federal Register to resume reviews. The combination of these actions irresponsibly have stalled our nation's primary source of life-saving biomedical research. It is our understanding that full communications have not been resumed and that it continues to impede critical research at the NIH. As I've been told time and time again by experts in this area, just to pause funding could set research back years. Because when you're conducting research, whether it's in a test tube, in biomedical research, you can't pause. Whether it's in a human body, in biomedical research, you can't pause. Across the nation, brilliant researchers have been finding out daily that the Trump administration has canceled their research. Research on critical issues like maternal health, long COVID, diabetes, new pharmaceutical drugs, cancer, and so much more. The NIH has decided to cancel its 2025 summer internship program. On average, 1,100 interns participate in this program each year, helping develop the next generation of scientists and researchers. A small number of summer interns had already been accepted their offer to join the NIH in 2025. The decision follows the Trump administration's federal hiring freeze. Again, in my faith, there's a saying, train a child in the way he shall go, and he will not depart from it. These are our young people. These are the future scientists now aren't getting the experience of a lifetime. I've met people in this institution.
I know,
who
right,
first came
Michelle?
here as college summer
Thank
interns.
you, Sprite. Sorry, I was just posting on Instagram saying that I'm on here.
The NIH has decided not only to cancel those internships, but to shut the door to many kids who had already made their summer plans. Many people here know what it's like to have a summer plan, have a summer internship, not apply for other ones. It's another act of just meanness and cruelty. Let this class come in and then say, okay, I'm going to cut the program next year, but the way they're doing things is mean and cruel and having an impact on people's lives. Congressionally directed medical research programs. I've worked across the aisle with my colleagues. I have friends in here that have worked with me on specific diseases in a bipartisan way. I'm so proud of some of that work. Well, we've long appropriated about $1.5 billion a year in federal funds for medical research, nearly half of which typically goes to cancer. It's something that we have found common ground on in my 12 years here in significant stretches. The medical research program
Hi, Vinny.
was
He's been
created
going since 7
and
p.m.,
sustained by
so
Congress.
just over 4 hours.
Competitively awards funds to hundreds of projects
4
each
hours
year
in.
at both the Defense Department labs and outside research institutions, including at many American universities, to study everything again from cancer to battlefield wounds to suicide prevention. In 2024, $130 million was specifically appropriated in a bipartisan way in this body, incredibly good senators of good conscience coming together and saying we should do more in these areas.
Thank you for sharing the live, guys. Appreciate
They
it.
approved $130 million for research in breast, kidney, lung, melanoma, ovarian, pancreatic, prostate, and a handful of very rare cancers. Why? Because they're people of good conscience here. We meet folks who come to this, not lobbyists, they come and they tell us about their stories of rare cancers. There are people on both sides of the aisle that have marched for prostate awareness, for breast cancer awareness. There's a goodness and decency here, but in 2024, this funding, it's a bill that passed in March. It was now slashed by 57%. And I told you earlier that data, one of the best taxpayer dollars we can spend is in medical research. We've all heard this in this body when the NIH has come thrown and shown $1 invested could get more than $5 back. Any Wall Street executive that would get 5 times their money back from an investment, who is this helping? And do we think about the people? I thank God I don't have many family members that are going about your day, go to the doctor, come back with a cancer. I know lots of people, though. I know their stories. When they're diagnosed with a cancer and they're told there's no cure. I've seen people go through what you go through in that. And so, how could the country that has led humanity for more than a generation or two suddenly have a president come along and say, I'm going to slash all of these things, and oh, by the way, I'm going to give billionaires a big tax cut?
Thank you, Sprite.
So what do we say when these folks come to our office?
Thank you guys for hanging
Some
out.
of the people with rare diseases came to my office a couple weeks ago.
I'll
And the
keep
amount of their
it
funding
playing
is so
as long as you
small.
guys want me to. I wasn't going to go live
And
tonight.
maybe if it
here
was
we
to
are.
solve our budget deficit, if we're going to do this as a country, we got to come together in a bipartisan way. The debt is I'm one of these Democrats that believes it's a real crisis. But we are not solving the deficit in what they're proposing here. They're cutting and cutting and cutting things that make no sense to cut. And they're doing it for a tax breaks which disproportionately go to the wealthiest and to rack up even more.
4
debt.
hours and 12 minutes.
I want to read this article, and my staff told me that we have lots of sections to go through, and it's been 4 hours and 11 minutes. But this is one that hurts me because I've met so many people who fall into this category. I want to read an article that deals with an issue called medical debt and the ongoing impact it has on people as part of their lives. The Affordable Care Act, when we did that, we lowered the costs and implemented protections for Americans, requiring insurers to cover pre-existing conditions, expanding Medicaid, which we've talked about a lot tonight, implementing caps on out-of-pocket costs for Americans. All of these helped in alleviating medical bankruptcy for some. Medical bankruptcies in America have gone down, but not all. We still live in a country where one of the top reasons for bankruptcy is medical debt. One of my staffers kind of shook me with the reality she was dealing with, which is she's got stratospheric medical debt. So here's an article from Healthcare Insights. It's not a partisan rag, it's a scientific journal. How medical debt is crushing 100 million
Pixel.
Americans.
Been good.
It's from October of last year.
Have you been?
This author, I just want to give a little more understanding of what kind of article this is. It's John August. He is the Scheinman Institute's Director of Healthcare. George Curley is one of 52 million people, or 1/3 of Americans in the workforce, who earn $15 an hour or less. I had the opportunity to interview George recently about his experience with medical debt and how
He's
it has impacted his
filibustering.
life.
He's been going
Having
for
suffered
4
an
hours
industrial accident,
and almost 15
And even though his
minutes.
employer was responsible for his injuries and he carried health insurance, he still accumulated $20,000 in medical debt. George grew up in Dallas and spent his life working hard as a full-time warehouse and retail worker. At one point in his life, he found a job and he enjoyed working as a forklift driver in a factory that produced ceramic tile. In time, he switched jobs, working on the production line. One fateful day, a piece of metal struck him in the foot. He had to have surgery and underwent the amputation of one of his toes. He had to take a month off from work, and when he returned, he went back to driving the forklift. He found that due to his accident and surgery, he couldn't operate the forklift to his satisfaction. He became frustrated, and not being able to operate the forklift, he grew depressed and left the job. It took me 3 months to get back on my feet after the toe amputation. There were nursing care for 2 months to help me work again. This life-saving medical procedure left me with over $20,000 in debt, even with insurance, exclamation point. I avoided doing necessary follow-up with doctors due to not being able to afford additional care. There were hard times on top of this. I suffered a great deal of depression due to losing my job during my leave of absence. This medical debt is currently following me. There was a point of time that I was rebuilding my credit. Before the surgery, I built it up by over 120 points. With the medical debt on my credit report, my credit score dropped 60 points. The big drop in score has not allowed me to get my own place. I'm not able to continue to pursue my dream of being a voice actor due to not having proper financial footing to get back to school. I can travel and do things I would like to do. I can't travel and do things I'd like to do. I'm working, but things are very financially tight. The medicine I need is being paid out of pocket. After paying my bills, I'm in the negative. There is no money left over to pay my medical debt. I can't save money right now, not even towards retirement. To have this medical debt on my credit score means not being able to pursue a better life. He went on short-term disability for a while, but then found the part-time job he holds now at Walgreens. He had to return to work to pay for the house he and his brothers had purchased. Through this period, George had to take payday loans, and between those loans and his weekly wages, he attempted to pay back the money he owed the hospitals. He learned that because of his medical debt, his credit rating was destroyed by credit agencies who learned that he had fallen behind on his payments to the hospitals. According to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which I guess barely exists now, 100 million Americans owe $220 billion in medical debt. 100 million Americans owe $220 billion in medical debt. George told me that the medical debt has had several devastating impacts on his life: inability to borrow money for a mortgage or a car.
Yes.
Employees ask for credit reports, and reports that show an applicant for a position are often rejected to a poor credit report.
I just let this run and
This
go
has
do my own
impacted his
thing.
ability to find a better job than his part-time job at $15 an hour with no benefits, working at Walgreens where he lives in Garland, Texas. Incredible stress that further impacts his health conditions, including diabetes. An additional note, Garland, Texas, where George lives, is near Dallas,
Yeah,
which includes
username.
Garland and Dallas is a locality with high medical debt and high profit for healthcare systems in the region. Though George makes very low wages, medical debt is a broadly shared experience by Americans across income groups. Clearly, low-wage workers suffer the worst burden,
God damn
but
it.
the problem is
I still haven't bought the
pervasive
ingredients.
and a broad feature of American life.
Shit.
Some background. In the oft-cited study, as many as 65.5% of people who file for bankruptcy blame medical bills as a primary cause. I'm going to repeat that in the article. 66.5% of Americans who file for bankruptcy blame medical bills as their primary cause. 2/3 of Americans who are filing bankruptcy point to medical bills as the cause. As many as 550,000 people file for bankruptcy every year for this reason. More than 500,000 Americans, year after year after year after year after year after year, for no fault of their own, because of a metal bar shoved up through his toe, because of a diagnosis of cancer, because
Well,
of diabetes.
I want to make a
because
lot of types.
of
I want to
things
start with a
outside of their
basic
control
ice cream base.
They
So you
rack
know
up
I've
medical
got it.
debt.
You know what I mean?
that as this man can erode their
You think
well-being.
you're gonna try to learn to juggle? Nice.
This data has been known about how many Americans affected and has
You gonna
continued even with the
learn with,
passage
like,
of the
YouTube
Affordable
videos
Care
or
Act.
something?
Lesser known is the amount of medical debt that Americans carry. What are the causes of this burden on so many? Well, more Americans have health insurance today than ever before. Coverage has many gaps. High deductibles and narrow networks, which prevent patients from seeking health providers of their choice, and common cause of accumulation of high-cost bills. When patients understandably seek care from a preferred provider, too often that care is not covered. Most healthcare plans only provide 80% of payment for covered costs. 20% patient responsibility of high medical bills can leave people unable to pay their bills. Approximately 14 million people in America, 6% of adults, in the U.S. owe over $1,000 in medical debt, and about 3 million people, 1% of Americans, owe medical debt of more than 10 grand. Additionally, this government report identifies many of the components of medical debt which are completely out of control of the patient. In most cases, these practices are unlawful, but hospitals use these tactics frequently to press patients to pay, including double billing. Companies can not attempt to collect on medical bills that have already been paid by the consumer insurance or a government program such as Medicaid or Medicaid. This practice can coerce consumers into paying twice for the same service. Expanding legal limits. Companies must not attempt to collect amounts that surpass federal or state caps, such as those set by the Federal No Surpass Act or state laws on reasonable rates. These violations can saddle consumers with unjustly high medical debts, burdening their finances. Falsified or fake charges. Debt collectors must not collect on bills that include upcoded or exaggerated services or charges that service the consumer did not receive. Collecting unsubstantiated medical debts. Debt collectors must not attempt to collect medical debts. These are all awful practices that go on. Here's Paul Sugar's story. Compelling and tragic.
No, not quite, Rosa.
Paul spent much of his life starting as a child as learning about jewelry, living in a small town near Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, really, Tim?
At an early age,
I just thought he
earned enough
was
money
doing it to,
selling silver and
because he
turquoise
started at the
necklaces
end of the
to be able to
day,
buy a motorcycle. As he became an adult, he devoted
like at the end of the
himself to
session.
successful
So it's
business
only
in the
really
mining and
gonna
selling of silver
start
and
to get
turquoise
really
used in
disruptive
making jewelry.
if he goes all
He
night
also worked at GE,
into the morning session.
GE engine plant.
Yeah,
He was
at
laid
7,
off during the
exactly.
time of industrial downsizing. He went to work for Quest.
I didn't think it was to
installing
stop
communications
anything
infrastructure, but was laid off
specific.
from that job when Quest was acquired by US West.
Just to be
So
like
he
generally
returned to his
disruptive,
business.
but you
On
might be right.
January 9th, 2019, he was terribly injured in a fire at his home. He is still recovering physically and economically after losing 66% of his skin,
I think I could filibuster.
getting care at a specialty trauma unit
That's such a,
in
like,
another part of the country. He ended up owing over
I feel like
$82,000
that's
in
such
medical bills.
an
The
an
medical debt on his
understandable
credit report means
thought.
he has not
had
been
that
able
thought
to get
before.
loans to expand his business
I could
and earn
I could
more
filibuster.
after the fire. His medical bills totaled $550,000.
This is Cory Booker's filibuster, yes.
Insurance covered most of it, but it was still
The
more than
last
he could pay.
question
He
was
made payment
asked
plans
maybe about an hour
all his
ago, maybe a
various
little
bills,
less.
But when his credit card number changed, some of the automatic payments he had arranged for did not go through, and the bills ended up in collection
Why?
before he even knew he was behind. Prior to the fire, he
I mean,
always had to
they
sell
don't
his
all
business.
have to be there the whole time.
It has gone down.
They
In his
aren't. I
business,
think
it's
the room
important
is
to be
pretty
able
empty.
to take out short-term
But Chuck Schumer
loans
was
to
in there.
supply the company, but now he can't do that.
asked a
Reasonable
question.
terms and rates. He spent his retirement savings account trying to pay back all of his medical bills, his retirement savings, but it wasn't enough. Now he worries about his future. How will he retire? Will he have enough for his daughter's college education? Can he move homes if he needs to? At one point, he needed to replace his car because he and his wife had to travel 18 hours round trips every couple of weeks to receive prescriptions for pain medication. He was denied the credit to do so. Our healthcare professionals are on the front lines of the impact of medical debt. Doctors and other healthcare professionals experience firsthand when patients are denied care due to medical debt. This article describes how healthcare systems deny patients with medical debt. Dr. Matt Hoffman, who was a leader in the successful effort to form a union with Doctors Council in 2023, talked about this problem. They instructed staff to stop providing care to patients with more than $4,500 in overdue bills, going beyond the more common practice of turning such debts over to collection agencies. He and his fellow doctors protested their healthcare system's decision to deny patients access to care due to medical debt. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison banned the denial of care for patients with medical debt. I mean, these practices sound like they're Byzantine. They don't sound like America, or at least who we should be. There's a lot of New Jerseyans who are dealing with medical debt. there are a lot of New Jerseyans that are being impacted by these programs that the president has already rolled back. I'm standing today because of this crisis in our country, and one of the strategies that Donald Trump and his team have talked about is to flood the zone, flood the zone, flood the zone. And so sometimes press doesn't even cover the cutting of some of these programs, some of these benefits that help people who are struggling with medical debt or struggling making ends meet, help them access health care. It's a level of distraction and cruelty. And again, why? Why are they cutting this? They're saying they're trying to make government more efficient or more effective. Well, it's not effective for these folks. And what are the savings going to go to? Is it going to go to expanding medical research, expanding those things that when taxpayers invest money on, they get returned? No, they're cutting medical research. They're cutting the things that empower children to grow up and have healthy, productive lives. And again, what they're aiming to do with it, is to provide massive, massive tax cuts. I'm coming to the end of this section, but there are more voices that I want to include. I'm going to read a few, and then I think I'm going to get a question from my colleague. So a few more pages, if I may, before we begin. It's a dialogue, or at least I'll receive a question, I imagine. But I just want to elevate some of these voices. This is a person writing to me on February 28th. Dear Senator Booker, I'm writing to you as a concerned citizen and most importantly as a proud aunt of a PhD in neuroscience, dedicating her life to research that could lead to life-saving treatments.
I have
As
to
a
make
minority
a
in science, she has worked incredibly hard with
post.
great barriers in the field.
If
that is not always
anyone
welcome
wants to
people
hop
like
up
her.
on voice chat,
Watching
you're
the
welcome
current
to.
political
I'm
attacks
just
on research funding is
kinda
not
here
just heartbreaking. It's dangerous for our country's
provide
future.
this.
Science is not political. It serves all people,
Can't tell
regardless
if
of race,
filibuster
background,
or
or party
gerrymandering is
affiliation.
my favorite
Yes,
politics word. This
funding cuts
true. It's
to
good.
agencies
I think I like
NIH
filibuster
and the National Science
first.
Foundation threaten to
little
halt
bit more than
critical
gerrymandering.
research, slowing the development of treatment for diseases that impact millions. These cuts will
Filibustering,
push
it's like,
out brilliant young scientists,
Buster!
many of whom have already had to fight to get where they are to do the research they're doing.
Silly bustering.
This is not just about my niece or scientists in general. It's about every American. Disease does not choose a political party. Cancer, Alzheimer's,
HW.
Parkinson's, and countless others affect Republicans and Democrats alike. Without strong investment in research, we are all at risk of losing the chance for better treatments, new cures, and improved health care. Beyond health funding, science will hurt our economy. Scientific research drives innovation, creates jobs, and ensures that the U.S. remains a global leader. A country that does not invest in science is a country that falls behind. I urge you to continue standing with the scientific community, supporting young researchers from all backgrounds, and fighting to protect and expand research funding. This is one of the most critical investments we can make for health, for economic growth, and for the future of every American. Thank you for your time, leadership, and dedication to building a stronger, smarter, and healthier nation. A couple New Jersey sources. At my university, this is a letter from someone in Somerset, New Jersey. At my university, I am extremely concerned that we are not as large an institution as some of the others and do not get as much state aid. We rely on these funds far more than running facilities. If this goes into effect, it will ultimately lead to the loss of jobs, research, opportunities for students, and will stunt our growth as we embark on a journey to become an R1 institution. I'm not sure we could recover from this anytime soon. Another person on these cuts to the NIH. I'm a postdoctoral researcher performing basic science research on bacterial communication. In short, I'm seeking to understand bacterial chemical communication to find new pathways for therapeutic development. Antibiotic resistance is already killing thousands of Americans each year. We need new treatments provided by indirect costs to find these cures. Indirect costs actually directly funded my day-to-day work, providing funds for building maintenance staff, university shared resources such as electron microscopes, and common laboratory supplies such as liquid nitrogen. Without any of these resources, my job and those of others researchers seeking new cures would be impossible. Thus, eliminating or reducing these funds will have a negative repercussions on the health and well-being of the American people for generations to come. It's my constituent from Plainsboro, New Jersey. Related to federal grant funding freezes, another New Jerseyan writes, I'm a researcher at a university in New Jersey where I study ways to combat cancer and promote infant health, critical research that ensures generations grow into healthy adults. My aspirations align with yours, fostering a strong, healthy, and educated population. For this reason, I urge you, Cory Booker, to take immediate action to restore normal federal grant operations so that my colleagues and I can continue making paradigm-shifting, state-of-the-art discoveries with the potential to save millions of lives. This university is dependent upon federal grants, a testament to the world-class quality of our research and its leadership in the biomedical field. These grants enable groundbreaking advancements that position the United States at the forefront of scientific information. I had planned to apply for a federal grant in 2025 to further my research. But with the current uncertainty, I'm deeply concerned about my application's future. Here's another scientist. My 5-year NIH grant is in its second year, and although my first year budget ended and I submitted all the required documents, my second year funding was cut. We need the funding to be able to continue our critical research. Here's another patient story. At age 17, a large black spot blocking his vision suddenly appeared in my patient's right eye. Over the next couple of months, multiple trips to increasingly specialized doctors led to a clinical diagnosis of von Hippel-Lindau disease. The diagnosis received by phone on his 18th birthday. This is a genetic disease in which the damaged VHL tumor suppressor gene fails to stop tumors from growing. Patients experience randomly occurring tumors.
I'm good.
in up to
I'm
10
busy and
organs.
overwhelmed
And
with
the only
everything.
available
And
treatment
I'm
was surgery to try to
dropping
remove the tumors. The patient is
dropping balls,
is one of about
you know.
10% of patients who are de novo, the result of random genetic mutation. This patient's case scans had revealed not only a large tumor on the optic nerve of his right eye, but also a huge tumor encompassing one of his adrenal glands that, in retrospect, had been causing him headaches, inability to concentrate, and anxiety due to consistently elevated adrenal levels. While MRI scans also related tumors in his spine, kidney, and pancreas, that this tumor, entire adrenal gland, needed to be removed. After months of injections, his eye interspersed with laser treatment, he lost the vision in his right eye. The time needed for medical care required us to give him to give up his team sport, losing both a support group and the chance to compete at the Division I level, but he continued with his final exams, graduation, and plans to study engineering at the university. With continued regular monitoring, he was able to attend university, but the trauma of his diagnosis and the processing of the impact of what it might mean for his life, coupled with the stress of engineering studies, brought on significant mental health challenges. He did go on to graduate, traveling to the NIH for his regular surveillance, supported by various specialists. In 2022, a kidney tumor had grown large enough that he needed surgery again. The kidney is a sensitive organ and will normally have full nephrectomy of the affected kidney. Doctors were treating him. And now at age 24, his tumor was removed in a successful kidney-sparing robotic operation. Yet tumors on his spine continue to grow. This experience of my patient and many others encapsulates the miracle of medical research funding that has such a powerful impact on people's lives. We were able to get seriously miraculous things done. But without funding for these diseases, we may never have a chance to test the ideas and developed them in a way that led to a drug that ultimately helped this patient with these tumors.
Who's crying?
This is a success story, but will we have more? Will we have others? The drug we developed is expensive. Current
just hanging out here.
recommendations are to take it daily. Nothing is known about its long-term side effects. More research is done. It's not known whether patients can take breaks from the drug. Stopping at some point might mean tumors would resume. One of the congressionally directed medical research program grants recommended for FY25 funding is going to look precisely at many of these questions. 2 others will examine other aspects of critical treatment. These are life or death issues for the patients. And yet this funding now is threatened. Yet this research now is threatened. Please continue to fully fund the congressionally directed medical program. I'm going to read a few more and then pause, just in case my colleague wants to ask a question. But this is Carrie Muller from Texas. My family has benefited from congressionally directed medical research programs because my 13-year-old daughters have neurofibromatosis, a rare genetic disease which causes uncontrolled tumor growth. My daughter Caitlin was diagnosed with a brain tumor 2 years ago, and thanks to a drug whose research was seeded with congressionally directed medical research program, her brain tumor has decreased to the point that it is now undetectable on an MRI. Without this drug, she would have had to try other chemotherapy treatments that would have been more invasive, in addition to brain surgery to bypass a blockage the tumor would have caused. This is Samantha Pearson from Las Vegas. For just over 4 years, I've been on a clinical trial at UCLA. The meds were just recently FDA approved. While the side effects sometimes made me question agreeing to the trial, being told my tumors have drastically shrunk made it all worthwhile. My pain has decreased. My plexiform neurofibroma is 90% smaller, and I am so happy that I get to be a part of this clinical trial made possibly by NFRP because of my participation in the drug trial. There is story after story here of people, Camille Olenberg, Jan Domowski, Lola Neudecker, Professor Alexander Robachevsky, Kyle Retz, Carissa Heberkamp from Illinois, Samuel Curtin, Dr. Stephanie Bucks-Hoveden, Katharina Hopp, Jared Tare, Dr. Terry Watnick, Scott Howe, Marine Corps retired, Van Stewart, United States Navy, Reed Novotny, Colonel, Maryland Air National Guard, Alex and Leslie, Chip and Kristen, Greg and Molly from Denver, William Tuttle, United States Navy. After my son's birth and diagnosis, I was diagnosed with tuberculosis sclerosis complex at the age of 43, just 3 months after I retired from the 23-year naval career. The complexity of this disease means that it remains to be seen whether my young son will be able to live the typical life that I have been fortunate to live. Because of research conducted through the TSCRP, my son has effective treatment options available to him that were not even just a decade ago. But there's still so much to learn. Again, another person benefiting from our research, benefiting from the funding that's now being threatened and cut. Beth Theinland from Nevada, Shelley Mitzler, Reed Hoffman, David Brooks Carpenter, a military family, Major David Long, United States Air Force, Deborah Moritz, Fran Heiler. I just want to say that the Declaration of Independence clearly states, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can you have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without health? Health is at the core of life. Health is at the core of true liberty. Health is at the core of the pursuit of happiness. The right to health is fundamental for overall well-being and for the realization of other human rights. In his annual State of the Union address to Congress on January 6, 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt underscored the importance and shared commitment to 4 freedoms. Many of you know them. The first freedom is freedom of speech and expression. The second is the freedom of every person to worship their own way. The third is the freedom from want, which means every person deserves peace and health, among other things, he said. The fourth freedom is a freedom from fear, which in our country of great wealth, no one should fear their health care going away. We have known from our country's beginnings and throughout that we must do all we can to provide for our people, and we have tried to do that over the years.
Yeah, there's a cameraman. I know.
Social Security Act of 65,
I realized that
which
too.
created
The first time he
Medicaid and
panned,
Medicare,
I
the
was
Health
like, God
Insurance
damn.
Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, HIPAA, to the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2010, the ACA. We should be adding to these protections and benefits, trying to get more people health coverage. We should be caring for each other. We should be loving each other. We should be fighting for the justice of each other. We should be hearing the cries of parents worried for their children. We should be hearing
you're saying
the
someone
agony
should
of
braid
a
my
partner
hair. We
whose
need a girls' night. Oh my God, I would
spouse has
love a girls'
Alzheimer's.
night
We
where
should
someone
be
just plays with my
standing
hair.
up for these folks.
Anyone else dance to the ringtone?
This is why we
Sorry,
fight.
that was TikTok. Every once in a while,
This is why
TikTok
I
is like,
stand.
"Are you still there?" And it screams at me.
Yes, I'll yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Senator Booker, first of all, I want to express my gratitude to you for recognizing the gravity of this moment. Your ability to see that we are facing a series of threats that are not normal, a series of threats to families, to children, to individuals, threats to our democracy, threats to our rule of law. I think it's really important. And you have endeavored to do something extraordinary
Dress
here
night
to
the
stand
day
on
before
your
my
feet for
ball.
as long
Yeah.
as you can to convey both to our colleagues and to the public that because these are not normal times, what is required of us is something different than a normal response. And I know maybe we have extended the amount of time that you had planned to talk on this particular topic of the threat to Americans' health care, but I don't know that there's anything more important
doubt
that,
it,
that
Shelley.
we're talking about today in the United States Senate. Because the scope
They are not good
of
people.
what Republicans are talking about here is absolutely extraordinary. And I want to lay out for you, a few additional facts and numbers and ask you to respond to them as you wrap up your time talking about this particular topic. But let me just underscore what you have laid out very well. We are talking about nearly $900 billion worth of cuts to Medicaid in order to pay for about $1 trillion worth of tax cuts for the wealthiest 1% of Americans. There will be table scraps in the Republican bill for middle-class consumers and families, but the bulk of the tax cuts are going to the very, very wealthy, millionaires and billionaires, frankly, people who have done tremendously well in this country over the past several decades, who are not in need of more. And so you were very right to point out the immorality of the 2017 attempt to cut the Affordable Care Act, which insured 20 million Americans. But Medicaid covers 70 to 80 million Americans. And the new wrinkle is that this proposal doesn't just cut health care for tens of millions of Americans. Estimates are that it could be 30 million Americans that lose health care under the Republican proposal. No, this is even more difficult to swallow for the American public than the 2017 attempt to cut and eliminate the Affordable Care Act, because this measure is a direct transfer of money from the poor and the middle class, the people who are on Medicaid, to the very, very wealthy. Frankly, it could turn out to be the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of the country from the poor and the middle class to the wealthy. Which is why I think you are taking this extraordinary step to make sure that our colleagues and the American people know the gravity of this moment. A lot of Republicans all across the country are not doing town halls any longer. They are not meeting in person with their constituents. And so there's a lot of Americans that are going to be in the dark, that have a lot of questions have a lot of questions about what's happening here, about why it is necessary to cut a program like Medicaid that insures 24% of Americans to the bone in order to finance a tax cut for the very, very wealthy. One of the things I just wanted to set up for you here is, just to note that Americans may be surprised to know that 24% of Americans are actually on Medicaid today, because some Americans may say, well, my insurance isn't Medicaid. My insurance is through Mississippi CAN, or my insurance is through Access Nebraska, or my insurance is through Centennial Care, or in Connecticut, my insurance is through Husky Health. In New Jersey, it's New Jersey Family Care, right? So Medicaid normally isn't called Medicaid. It's called something different in every state. And so it's important for you to understand that so many of your neighbors are on Medicaid, even though it may not be called Medicaid in your state. That's how we get to 24% of American families on this particular program. And the Joint Economic Committee, which is a committee of Congress, did a study, issued a report talking about how many people would lose their health care insurance on a state-by-state basis if this $880 billion cut to Medicaid went through. And I won't go through the whole list, Senator Booker, but I just pulled out some states that are represented by our Republican colleagues. In Alabama, 20% of Alabamans are on their Medicaid program. And in total, 330,000 people in one state, Alabama, would lose their health care if this cut went through. In Arkansas, 25% of families are on the Arkansas Medicaid program. 250,000 people would lose their health insurance. In Florida, 17% of the state is on Medicaid. 1.3 million Floridians could lose their health care because of these Medicaid cuts. We can just go on and on. 20% of Iowans are on the Medicaid program, 20% of Indiana residents, 25% of Kentucky
a lot of red
residents,
states with a lot of people
of
on
Louisiana
Medicaid.
are on their state's Medicaid program. 500,000
And what do you
residents of
bet?
Louisiana could
What do you
lose
want to
their
bet?
healthcare.
They're going to
Some
be
of that
so
would happen
outraged
in a
at
sort
what
of
they
slow-moving
fucking did to
catastrophe,
themselves.
But as you pointed out, Senator Brooker, a lot of that would happen immediately, because many of the states that have taken advantage of the Affordable Care Act Medicaid
They're going to be
expansion
so
have
outraged
a
that they're
built-in
losing what they
clause
wanted
to their
everyone
state's
else to
law that
lose.
says the
And they're going to
minute
expect
the
our
reimbursement
fucking
rate
pity.
declines, even if it declines by only a few percentage points, the entirety of the Medicaid expansion program is eliminated. So
Right, it was
overnight,
supposed to be
you will
everyone
have
else.
Millions of people who will
Supposed to
lose
be
their healthcare
everyone
insurance.
else who was
But if you-
affected.
As you have rightly pointed out, that's just the beginning of the disaster.
Yes,
Because
they will find a way
there
to.
are hundreds of rural hospitals in this country that are right now living on the
No, it
brink
actually
of
affects.
disaster.
I'm pretty sure it affects red
If
states more.
Medicaid reimbursement
Red
drops
states
just by 5
are
or 10%,
the heaviest
those rural
fucking
hospitals are out of
welfare
business.
states
Same can be
in the
said
country,
of
like on
thousands of
average.
drug treatment
I believe
centers
more people
in
are on
this
Medicaid, and
country,
let's look it up.
addiction treatment centers. And so you're ultimately talking about hundreds, if not
Yeah.
thousands, of hospitals and health centers closing, millions of
Oh, I
Americans
see what you're
losing
saying.
their health care insurance. And for what? And for what? To be able to hoard a bunch of money so that the richest Americans can buy a third vacation home? So that millionaires can double their landscaping budget? Who's asking for this in America today? Of course there's a conversation to be had about efficiency in our healthcare programs, but none of that conversation is happening here. If it was, you wouldn't be reading the letters of all of these associations representing healthcare groups predicting disaster. They would actually be in the room at the table, because if you really wanted to save money, you'd actually put the doctors and the hospitals and the medical providers who know something about the system in a room. But instead, this is a political decision that's been made to cut a certain amount of money that does not coincidentally line up to the amount of money that the Republican budget bill wants to give in tax cuts to the very, very wealthy. And so you, I think rightly put emphasis and drew attention to John McCain's decision, and of course we should always give credit to Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who also voted
But
no
you
in
have to
2017
realize,
on
Rev,
the
that it
Affordable
is
Care Act bill.
empowered
Because
by
it's
and
just a
fueled by the people who are
reminder
in this
that
for
you're
the
under
vacation
no
homes.
obligation
Yeah, there's
as
a
the
select
United
few that
States
are just
senator
absolute
to
after
do the
absolute
wrong
fucking
thing
power,
either
which
way.
they can already afford, right? They can already.
You work so
Elon
hard
Musk
to
can
get
afford the
this job,
same now
spend your
as he can
entire life
afford with an
working
extra
to
billion.
become
He can.
somebody who can make important decisions like we can
But
in the
there's
United
but
States
you
Senate.
need the
And you are
cooperation
under no
of a
obligation
lot
to
of people in
outsource
between
your
who are in
decision-making
it for the
to
fucking extra
the
vacation
President of the
home.
United
You know what I
States or
mean?
your party leadership. Everybody here gets
He
to
couldn't
make
do
an
it on its own,
independent decision
on his own.
on what's right or wrong. And this just feels plain wrong. A thoughtless, unplanned, massive
Exactly.
cut in Medicaid that's going to throw
Not just look away from the
millions of
harms,
people
but
off
help
their
them
health
happen.
care
Every
in
fucking
order to
Republican in
finance a
Congress
tax cut,
is
the
complicit in
majority of
this.
which is gonna go to people
And it's
who
not
don't
because they're
need it.
outright going to have the same amount of power
Every
as Elon
senator
Musk.
here
They're not.
can make up their own
But
minds
they're going to
as to
benefit
whether
a
that
bit
is the
from
right
it.
thing or the wrong
They're going
thing
to
to do
they're going to benefit
for
somewhat from it.
this country. And the exercise
that's
that
enough,
you were
yeah.
engaged in, Senator Booker, is a simple one. Just trying to make sure that all the facts are on the table. That last segment you did on the impact on medical research should be reason alone
I have to
for
make a
folks
TikTok
to
about some news
reconsider
that just
the
hit.
path this administration is taking. But the Medicaid cuts as a mechanism to further enrich those that are already plenty rich. Man, I just don't imagine that is anything that the American
Yeah,
public
right.
are clamoring for.
Yeah, Riff.
And so, Senator Booker, I just wanted to really thank you for standing up and making this moment possible. And I want to leave you with just two stories on this topic that have come into my office and then ask you a question. This is all a lead up to a question. So I have a constituent who was paralyzed about a decade ago, and he now exists in a wheelchair, and the only insurance program that can provide him with what he needs from a mechanical and technological standpoint, plus the drugs he needs to survive, is Medicaid. It's his only option. It's his only option. He can't work. He's paralyzed. Medicaid is his only option. And for him and for millions of others, Medicaid is life or death. It's just life or death. If you're talking about cutting Medicaid by as much as 20%, that's what we're talking about here today. An $880 billion cut to Medicaid represents about 10% of the overall program. But you have to assume that states are not going to continue to match if the federal government isn't putting in their share. So that 10% cut could very quickly become something closer to a 20% cut. There is no way that you can cut the Medicaid program by 20% without it impacting people like my constituent in a wheelchair who comes to many of my events when we protest these Medicaid cuts. This is life or death for many Americans. But that's not the full extent of the horror that will happen. I was just reading a letter the other day from an 80-year-old constituent of mine who lives at home with his wife, but his wife is very frail, and it is Medicaid and Connecticut's Medicaid waiver that allows for her to receive in-home health care services. And he is panicked. He wants to spend the final years of his life with his wife. And he knows that if Medicaid gets cut, even on the margins, that Medicaid waiver likely is gone. And either his wife will pass, or she will have to be in an institution. Query whether that institution will be able to even give her a place, because 2/3 of nursing home beds in this country are paid for by Medicaid. And so one way or the other, he is staring separation from his wife in the eye. She either doesn't make it without the Medicaid reimbursement that gives her the services at home, or she is forced to go to an institution and they live separately for their final days. This is the reality facing people who rely on Medicaid, whether you are disabled or elderly. This is the reality that will be imposed on millions of Americans in order to finance a tax cut for the wealthy. The scope of this is just enormous, Senator Booker. And so I guess this is the question I wanted to ask you. You and I have been in government for a long time. We've served in a variety of different capacities. I don't think this country is really ready for the scope of the healthcare cataclysm that could come with $1 trillion cut to the health insurance program that is responsible for the care of 1/4 of Americans, 2/3 of nursing home beds, and the budgets of literally tens of thousands of vital healthcare institutions in this country. And so nobody is better than you at conveying the moral consequences of the decisions we make here. Just share with us for a minute as you sort of wrap up a conversation on this topic of the health care priorities of the Trump administration and the Republican Congress, what America may look like in a world where we have decided to gut the program, the health insurance program of last resort for the most vulnerable Americans, and the health insurance program that insures 24% of Americans, 2/3 of which are working for a living. Just give us a little bit of a sense of the enormity of the consequence that this ultimately would bring to this country.
So first of all, thank you for the question, but I just want to reiterate the friendship I have with Chris Murphy and his willingness to spend the night with me here on the floor as we go hour after hour after hour. And I just want to say this again, and I'm going to say it a few times in this long speech that will go on for as long as I'm physically able. Chris, the last time we spent 15 hours on this floor together was a health issue. It was yet another stunning mass shooting, this time at the Pulse nightclub. And you and I talked a lot before we got on this floor. And I think the agony that you and I were feeling was, how can this be the strongest nation on the world who organized government? If you read our founding documents, if you read our founding fathers, one of the first things they organized this government for, you know, it's good to carry around the Constitution.
Just here to make me feel guilty.
You know, it is so important to understand what the preamble to the Constitution says we are about. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. Do ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States, which each one of us in this body went down there and swore an oath to uphold. Those are the first words of this, Chris. And God, I remember your agony. Folks, I want you to know, when I came to this body, my staff was talking about the maiden speech. Please don't go look back and look at my maiden speech. It was not great. But the maiden speech my staff wanted me to watch was yours. And it was gut-wrenching about Newtown. Gut-wrenching that the strongest nation on the planet Earth should now be this nation where we tell our children,
why the 21st?
In this implicit lesson, not explicit, but implicit lesson, we are going to teach you how to hide. We're going to run active shooter drills because we can't protect you. And my mom lives in Vegas, and that Vegas shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. And so here we were in yet another of these maddening realities in our country, that the leading cause of death for our children is shooting. And in our conversations leading up to it, I still remember you and I saying, we need to come to this floor.
Brett, I'm not sure. I'm not a journalist.
I'm going to stand and do something different. And we, again, just like tonight, we had no end to that. we were 9 years younger, my friend.
According to what, Tim?
And we said we were going to stand down here and try to get this body to do something different, to try to get this body to recognize the gravity of what was going on in the strongest nation on the earth that was having child after child after child, American after American, dying to gun violence. And the response we were getting from this body, the world's most deliberative body, was nothing's going to change. We can't do anything. I mean, I'm going to give you respect. Years later, you were part of the first gun legislation passed out of this body in 30-something years. And now, I just found out that the community violence intervention money that you allowed me to fight so hard to get into that bill is being clawed back by Donald Trump. Our bipartisan bill, our bipartisan approved finances, money, and I think a taking away of our power in this body from the bill that you were one of the main architects of, with Republican colleagues, God bless them, people like Cornyn and others. And so I just want to take people back to what the insider conversations, and you were generous. I want to remind you, just teasingly on the floor, you never asked me if you could publish my text messages, but you put them in your book. It's a great book. I actually learned, I read lots of my colleagues' book. I learned a lot of data about gun violence from your book. And we were talking about this belief that these words, this belief in our country that these words, why this government was formed, is so important. America, this is who we are, these imperfect geniuses. We formed this, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. And so you stood right down there for 15 hours. I paced this room, pledging to you that I wouldn't go to the bathroom, I wouldn't sit down, and I was hurting after 15 hours. But you were steadfast until we finally got Mitch McConnell to give us something. Was it 1 or 2 votes? It was 2 votes, and both of them failed. We didn't get 60, but at least we forced this institution to confront the horrendous horrors of that nightclub shooting. And so you ask me now, as you and I and my dear brother, who I've known since he was coming out of college, 3 of us on this floor at a new day, it's past midnight, a new month, it's past midnight, as we sit here. Why? Because of your question.
It's April Fools. Damn.
I can't stand anymore to live in a country where it seems that there's convulsions.
What should I do for April Fools? Should I fool anyone about anything? Should I tell Philippe I'm pregnant?
I have to speak up. We have to do something different yet again. And I talked about this last week.
Should I tell Philippe I'm pregnant? He's not in the city. He's traveling for work, though.
Right now. We read the section about medical debt.
The problem is he's got work tomorrow morning, and by the time I could call him to try to prank him, he would have figured out it's April Fool's. So I can't. It's not gonna work.
A lot of problems, but we weren't saddled with a rare disease. We didn't have tumors springing up all over our bodies. I don't know what that would have done to my family.
Let's see if I can bring Riz over. She's looking extra cute tonight.
There is so much similarity between the debate that you are forcing this Senate to have tonight and the debate that we were having back in 2016 on this epidemic of gun violence. I always describe it this way. The only thing that matters, the thing that matters more than anything else in your life, is protecting your loved ones from physical harm.
Yes,
right?
I could.
You would give anything, right? Anything. You would give your life saving, your house.
But I'd have to like.
Your own life in order
I'd have to get a
protect
photo
your
online,
child, your
and
brother
I feel
or
like
sister
most
or mother or
photos
father
online
from
are just
physical
not going to look
harm.
like my
And so when
apartment.
you and I have sat
I would have had to
across
have
from the
ordered one
victims
ahead of time,
of
I
gun
think.
violence, many of which
better,
live
more effective.
in your neighborhood and my neighborhood, in Newark and Hartford, we are looking at a kind of desperation and sorrow that is unique, that comes with not just losing a loved one to gun violence, but feeling powerless in that exercise, feeling like there was nothing you could do, and watching your elected leaders stand by and allow for this reality to continue to occur in your neighborhood where kids are being shot down in cold blood, and your elected leaders, the adults in charge of your community, are standing idly by. That is not fundamentally different than the reality that will be visited upon millions of families if this size of a cut in Medicaid funding goes into effect, because families out there who rely on Medicaid to keep alive their son or daughter who has a complicated medical disease have no other quarter, have no other last resort besides Medicaid. And so Medicaid stands between life and death for their son or daughter. There is no other place for them to go. And so that same empty, hollow look that we have seen so many times in the eyes of a mother or father who lost a son or daughter to gun violence, that is the look that we are choosing to visit upon millions of families in this country who, when faced with the loss of their only health insurance option for their disabled child,
do you want to get down here?
will watch their child potentially face the same fate as those young men in your neighborhood and my neighborhood. And so that's the reason why I pose this question to you that you're answering about the moral gravity of this moment, because it is not fundamentally different than the one that brought us here in 2016.
And can I, in answering this question, and again, I'm going to continue to yield the question to you while retaining the floor, I want to just compound this for people, because I know these numbers, 880 billion, 100 million Americans affected by that would be affected directly by Medicaid cuts, or the people that work in the hospitals that would be affected by Medicaid cuts, or the nursing homes that are affected by Medicaid cuts. These are big, big numbers, but people, these are human beings. I live in a community that had a horrible lead poisoning problem for their kids, that had horrible toxic sites, and children born around toxic Superfund sites, as you know they're called, have higher rates of autism, higher rates of birth defects. And so even coming up as a city council person, I saw that the environmental injustices surrounding my community were causing parents to have to deal with medical complications amongst their children at alarming rates and needed help, and Medicaid was the program. No fault of their own, environmental injustice. Now, here's the double insult of the Trump administration. One is they gutted the environmental justice section at the DOJ. They're not investigating corporate polluters. They're not investigating the injustices environmentally that big, powerful, wealthy people do, that often cause people, we all saw Erin Brockovich, that cause people to get seriously hurt. And then the second part of that insult is, we're not only not going to hold people accountable and let them get away with that, the polluters or what, the folks causing often the source of the disease, we're now not going to help get health care to the families who often live in fragile communities that have these resources. These are the people, when you sit with them in your office, as you and I have, as me and the other senator from New Jersey on the floor tonight have, as you sit with them and they tell you their stories, and you see that this is a lifeline, that this Medicaid program, and you were so good by telling people, because I saw this during the Affordable Care Act, just the name alone, people like, I don't have Obamacare. Yes, you have the ACA, and let me explain it to you. It's under many different names, including in my state, that people don't know that this is a Medicaid funded program. So they don't know that this is a sword of Damocles at their family's well-being. But this is the larger issue, Senator Murphy, is that these are real people in every county, in every state. It's why they're representatives. It's why I read statements demanding there not to be cuts by the organizations, bipartisanly read, the League of Cities, the largest mayor association, Republican governors, and others are all saying do not cut this program. They're not even saying don't do 880 million, maybe just do 400 million. They're saying do not cut this program. And many of them are saying, in fact, we need to find ways to expand the program because there's still gaps that people are falling into. And it doesn't make economic sense because if you get regular care, if your chronic disease is treated, it ultimately could be cheaper to the taxpayer as opposed to people ending up in hospitals. But those hospitals now, because of what's being threatened in this bill, rural hospitals and tier 1 trauma hospitals are all being threatened in their care. And so tonight, it's not normal. I ask everybody to understand this is not a normal moment in America. This is a crossroads moment in America. It's one of those times where the values that we talk about in the Constitution are at stake. What is going to define us? Our commitments to ideals of justice, fairness, of being there for each other. And one of those other programs that is now in crisis is what I want to switch to. And I think my colleague was joking with me because we have, for anybody who's watching, we have a whole list of things we wanted to get to, and my staff now seemingly very ambitiously, Medicaid, Medicare, healthcare, Social Security is coming up now, tariffs and economic policy, education, national security, public safety, immigration, housing, chapter by chapter, each one about an hour or so. This would be enough to make it till tomorrow evening if I can stand that long, and who knows. But we're behind schedule, so I'm going to jump into talk about Social Security. And I want to start because, as I said earlier, I get to stand here. I get to come on this floor, but so many millions of people don't, and I want to elevate their voices tonight because as I go across New Jersey, as I go across my nation, I see Republicans, Democrats, independents, veterans, so many people stopping me in airports, stopping me in the community, stopping me in the grocery store, wanting to tell me that they're afraid, that they're angry, that they're worried, that they believe we are in crisis, that our nation is at a crossroads. Who are we going to be as a nation? And this topic, I don't know if, maybe I will just let you all know that this topic, my mom chewed into me about this topic. She lives in a senior citizen retirement community, mostly Republican. I visited her many times. It's a great community. I hate how we go to this idea of right or left. These are great seniors that live in a great community, and they're talking about Social Security. So I want to read, start before this section by just reading. This is how people are sending it to me. This is a small postcard, handwritten, from somebody from Hamilton Square, New Jersey. Dear Senator Booker, I'm writing to ask you if my Social Security is now in danger. Please let me know. It is very important to me. Thank you. I'm going to try to answer that tonight fairly and candidly. Here's another person who writes, my staff is protecting their identity. I just want to say where they're from, South Plains, New Jersey. I am one of your constituents and a proud New Jersey, and I'm writing to let you know how upset, distraught, and worried I am about the current state of our country. I hope you will take time and read my letter, as this is the first time I have felt compelled to write a government official. I want to tell you, I'm reading your letter again, and I'm now reading it on national TV if C-SPAN can be. Presiding officer might challenge me with a factual error, but C-SPAN is national TV, I think. I want to start by telling you a little about myself. I am 64 years old, and I am currently working full-time. I am a breast cancer survivor. My plan was to retire in the next 3 years, but with the current state of chaos and turmoil, I honestly don't see how I can retire. I'm concerned about Medicare, which I will definitely need when I retire. I will also need a supplemental plan for whatever Medicare does not cover. I do not qualify for retirement benefits through my job. With the cuts being made to federal programs, Medicare will not be enough. I would need a more expensive supplemental plan to cover these cuts. I am also concerned about Social Security. I have worked since I was 16, except for 9 years when I was home with my 3 children. I have worked hard and paid into Social Security and believed that the money was for my retirement. Now I hear that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and it may be privatized. This is so unfair for people like me that worked hard all their life and counted on this money to retire. I was planning on working past 65 to get my full Social Security benefits, but now I begin to wonder if it's worth it. Now I begin to wonder if it's worth it. So at this point, I'm in a holding pattern due to the unstable climate in which we are all living. As I said, I have 3 children who are all adults now. My son has been diagnosed as being bipolar. He's been hospitalized a few times due to this. He is currently on medication that he needs to function and sees a therapist. He is in grad school and is on Medicaid. He works part-time since he is a full-time grad student, so he does not qualify for benefits. I worry about what these cuts will do to my son and others like him. No one seems concerned with the people who rely on these programs to live their best life. Someone needs to look out and take an interest in helping people in these circumstances. My daughter is a teacher in a district that receives Title I funds. She works very hard as a teacher and is devoted to her students. With the supposed dismantling of the Department of Education, I'm concerned about what this means to the education field, teachers, administration, and students. My daughter's school is making a difference in the lives of these students, and they need the funding that is received from both the state and federal government. Programs like the Title I and other federally funded programs need to stay in place. On another topic, this constituent is getting a lot into her first letter to a government official, and I appreciate it. On another topic, inflation. Increasing prices and the overpriced housing market is a huge problem. Placing tariffs on our biggest trade partners is beyond unfair. This drives the cost of goods up, and the consumer is the one who ends up paying the increase. A lot of families are food insecure, wondering where their next meal is coming from. A lot of parents go without so their children can eat. Food pantries and banks are scrambling to meet demand.
Cory Booker is symbolically filibustering in the Senate. He's just speaking for hours. He's been doing it for 5 hours now, over 5 hours. He's hoping to go all night.
Thank you for reading my letter. I'm asking you as our senator.
It's being live streamed
Stand up
on
for what is in the best interest of families, seniors,
TikTok,
adults,
elsewhere,
and
so
children.
I might
Tariffs,
tap out
dismantling departments like Social
soon.
Security,
because you guys don't really need me
Medicare,
to do this.
Medicaid,
And I need
education,
to
and
film.
other
I need to
services
film a
that are
TikTok
important to the everyday person is not.
about a story that just
the
dropped
answer.
a little while ago.
You are our voice in the Senate. Please do the right thing and speak up and continue to fight for everyday Americans. This is why I'm standing up. This is why I will stand.
He's not
Here as long as I'm
blocking
physically
specific
able. This is why I
legislation
will
that I'm aware of.
continue
Someone said he's
to tell story
blocking
after
a
story.
vote
But
on an
first,
appointment.
A little
My
important
it's
history.
so he started
90
at the end of the
years.
session. Technically, it's only going to start
Our country has made a
blocking
promise to
actual
people that if you pay
things
into the Social Security program your whole life,
once
that
the
money
morning
will be there
session
for you when you
starts.
retire.
You know. So this is partially
Roosevelt
symbolic, which is
Signed the
fine
Social Security
because
Act into law
personally, like,
84 years ago.
you know,
And this is
all
his quote. He
protest
called it
is,
a
or most
cornerstone
protests,
in
let's
a
say,
structure which
is
is
symbolic.
being
That's the
built,
point of it.
but it
You know
is
what I
by
mean?
no
It's to
means
make a
complete.
physical, make a
Social Security is
message
still a cornerstone,
visible
still the bedrock, according to
through some form
FDR.
of performative act. You know,
It's the
whatever.
bedrock
So
edifice
he's not
built
exactly stopping
in a
stuff
nation
yet. In the morning, he
we
will
belong
be
to
sort
each
of slightly, but
We,
but it's
the
also
people
mostly
building this,
symbolic.
That's our cornerstone. He called it the Social Security.
I like it. I'm glad he's doing
Today,
it.
73 million Americans
I think
count
that's
on Social
important. I
Security.
think it's valuable.
Millions more than that are
I know,
planning on
same,
those benefits
Angela.
they earn being there. For
Same.
You heard from the first letters I read that people are really
Anything
worried.
in the AM we should focus on?
President of the United States stood up in
Like
the State of the Union address and
to do?
talked about rampant fraud because payments are going
Watch.
out.
It's okay to be a Karen now. Yeah,
All that
exactly.
From
It is okay
conservative
to be a
papers
Karen
to
now.
ones on the other side have shown
I was thinking that
what
the
he was
other day
saying was
when
not true.
I'm in some video.
But
I was
they're
like,
sowing
if you try
chaos.
to
They're
deport me, I will.
attacking,
Or if you try to
delegitimizing it, calling it
disenfranchise
a
me, I will
Ponzi
make your life
scheme.
hell.
Doge,
It's like that's the most
leader,
Karen thing I think I've ever
Musk,
said.
and the
I was
president.
like, you know what? I'll be a fucking Karen. I'm not
But
ashamed.
73
I'll
million
be a
Americans
fucking
are counting on
Karen.
Social Security benefits, and
Tag me,
1.6
Joe,
million in
manager.
my state. 40% of people who rely on Social Security.
Anything in the
40%
AM we should focus on. I
no
would
other
check
source
in
of
on
income.
where he's at.
They live paycheck
in the
to
morning,
paycheck. Social Security
actually.
check, excuse me. Social Security chunk.
Because if he's somehow
And
able to go overnight,
Despite mocking Social Security,
he might actually
calling it a
successfully
Ponzi scheme that had communities
disrupt
of
a
my
bit
parents,
in the
my
morning,
mom's.
which would be fun to see. Oh yeah,
People beginning to worry.
Wisconsin. Is it tomorrow?
They actually took
April
real
1st?
actions to lay off thousands of
Wisconsin
Social
Supreme
Security
Court
employees, making it
election
harder to
tomorrow,
process Social
the one that
Security
Elon is
applications
currently
and
buying.
troubleshoot
Oh, and I believe the special
questions
elections, right? In
for beneficiaries. They didn't roll out a plan
Florida?
to say, hey, this
The
is how
Florida-
we're gonna show that we can do the best customer service ever.
Oh, thank
We're gonna bring some of
you.
the best
Yeah,
private
it was
sector
my
people to
pleasure,
advise
Angela.
on how we can use
Saturday,
technology and innovation to
look
give
it
the
up.
best
There's
customer service.
there's
How
marches
roll in
happening. It's
AI,
called the
all these
Hands
things.
Off
We're gonna make
March,
a
and they're
model
happening all over
of
the country.
responsiveness to our seniors.
Millions of
We're a
people have
society
signed
that
up.
respects our elders,
Definitely look it up.
values
I'm gonna
them,
try to go
wants them
to the
retire
one
with
in
dignity
DC,
and
but if I
security
can't
and
figure it
peace
out
of
because it
mind.
might be a bit of a
That's
nightmare
the
to
big
get there,
ambition.
I'm in New York
No,
City,
that's
so I'll
not
go
what
to the
was
one in
said.
New York City. But
Social
Yeah.
Security employees, like many employees, got letters that they didn't expect, saying they were laid off.
I'll
Didn't
be
matter
at one
how
of
well
them.
They performed. It didn't matter what function they performed.
Nice, nice,
And it put in
awesome,
jeopardy
Angela. Thank you for doing that.
Just trying to contact Social Security if you're retiring. Just trying to contact Social Security if you need to apply for benefits. They try to eliminate
Yeah, I'm gonna try
service by
to
phone,
film this TikTok.
saying that they
now.
wanted to require in-person visits, which is absurd
I gotta get energy up.
for many seniors that don't have
By the way,
access to
Angela, I posted
transportation
a
or live in
video
rural
with some
areas.
clips from it that
Because
went
what they're doing
nowhere
also
because
is
my
that
videos are
they're
getting
trying to
suppressed
close
now.
down
If
many
you want to
Social
go
Security
give it a
offices.
watch, if you watch it
We'll
all
get
the
to
way
the specifics
through
of that later.
and then
These
like,
actions
comment,
are
reshare,
harmful
whatever,
enough, but
that
they're
helps
just the beginning
the most.
of
But
what our president
if
and
not,
Elon
no
Musk
worries.
are
I'm
saying
sure
they
it'll go
wanna do
nowhere.
through a program that for millions of
My other one, the
Americans,
first
they're
one
only
I
a week.
shared,
It's essential for them, and others
which
it's
was
how they make their
unfortunately
retirement
less than a minute
secure.
long, is completely inundated with MAGA.
Don't protect the
The
future
first
by
one is
punishing the
completely
people who
just
built this
MAGA
country.
ridden, and unfortunately,
fix
because it's under a
America by
minute
throwing
long, I'm
seniors or
not
veterans
making
or
any money
Americans
off of their
under the
hate.
bus. That's
I
not
wish I
how we
could.
do
I'm
things.
just
That's not how
fucking
we should do
kicking
things.
myself. But the second one I
There's so
posted that
many
actually shows the
hardworking
full
families
crowd and all
that
this
believe
stuff
in
that
this idea. If I work
I made
hard
that
all my
just
life
over a
in
minute
America,
long,
I can
so.
make ends meet, I can raise
But
my
that
kids,
one's going
and I can
nowhere.
retire with dignity.
Anyway, so guys, this is live
Congress does have a
elsewhere
responsibility
on
to
the
use
app.
stewards of
I believe
taxpayer
he
dollars.
probably has a
We should
TikTok
do
where it's being
more
live
of
streamed,
that.
but
I wanna
also
do more. That's what we
Reuters
need in that
is
fight.
live
But
streaming
none
it.
of us were invited to a table
So I
when it
highly,
came to
highly
this.
recommend. I'm
This
gonna personally tap
congressionally
into the live and let it
established
play,
program, PR I read,
just
but it
to
was
give the
Congress
solidarity.
established it. It is now
You know, I'm gonna
not being
listen to it
included
as
in
I
the
get ready for
planning or
bed and
procedures
stuff,
to try to
and I might
improve
just
Social
leave it
Security, make
playing
more
when I go
efficient
to
or
as I
more
fall asleep.
effective. We haven't convened hearings or task forces in a bipartisan way
But yeah, I
to find out
highly
what we
recommend it.
can
And
do
then
to
check
better
in the
serve our
morning.
seniors.
Let's see where he's
Instead,
at in the morning.
lies are being proffered about Social Security.
I
making
think it's good. I think it's good that
wrongful
he's doing it.
payments.
He's not my favorite.
Lies
Listen, he's
are
not my
being
favorite
proffered and
politician.
offered by
He's not my
the
favorite
highest
person in
office
general.
in the land.
But credit where credit is due, right? Like,
Most richest
the fact
person
that
in
he's
the
doing
land
this
does not need
is
Social
good.
Security. He's calling it a
I think it's
Ponzi
good.
scheme, telling people who are relying on it they're part of a Ponzi scheme. But remember this,
Thank
Social
you.
Security is not the government's money
Thank
to
you,
spend.
guys.
It's the
Thank you for
hard-earned
hanging out.
savings of working Americans,
All right.
and it belongs to Americans.
Let me do
President
this.
and Elon Musk need to keep their hands off of it. It's not theirs to take, and it's not
It
theirs
was, yeah,
to
in
break.
1957, I believe.
They're
Thurman,
they're
right?
the ones that have a
Thurmond.
scheme, and it's not about efficiency.
He did one that was like 14 hours and
Not
50 minutes, I
visionary,
believe,
is what
or
we
13
need in
hours
America
and
now,
50
is
minutes.
visionary
Whatever.
leaders who have
Okay.
bold, exciting visions
That's it.
for what things like Social Security can be.
Good
And
night,
what they're
guys.
doing is not only wrong, it hurts people. It scares people. And not just people, our elders. People who raised us, the people who built roads and highways, the people who served food, made food, who started